As you get ready for the fantasy football playoffs, which players should you be stashing ahead of time to keep on your bench that might come up big when it matters most? I'm about to tell you. Welcome back to the Fantasy Endgame. I'm Pierre, and I'm here to help you with some waiver wire pickups that could help you. These are guys to stash on the bench. A lot of these guys I'm going to talk about aren't even playing in Week 14, but they could help you when it matters the most. And of course, I'm talking playoff time. Let's start with the obvious, and this is a guy that we're kind of curious to see what he can do, and that is rookie quarterback Desmond Ridder. Now, I mentioned Brock Purdy on the waiver wire video earlier this week, but Desmond Ridder was announced as a starter midweek, and it's not really a shock. I was actually getting ready to talk about Ridder anyways because, the Falcons are on a bye, didn't know what they would kind of figure out during that week off. This means it's a logical time for them to make that switch if they're going to. It seems pretty obvious that they're not destined for the playoffs anymore after Tampa won. But they made that decision easy for me because now they know that Ridder is going to be their guy at least this first week. And I think unless things go horribly wrong, probably the rest of the way. All right, what do they have to lose? They need to try him out and see what they have with him. So Desmond Ridder, if you don't know, played at Cincinnati for 4 years and took the Cincinnati Bearcats to a 13-1 record. Their only loss was to Alabama in the college football playoffs. He threw for over 3,300 yards and 30 touchdowns as a senior, and this guy who runs a 4.52, which is pretty good for a quarterback. Now, ironically, that's the exact same time Marcus Mariota posted, but of course that was several years ago, and Ridder, being a rookie, got the fresh legs. He's going to give you that dual threat ability, which is really the only thing that kind of kept Mariota's fantasy value afloat this year, and even then mostly for super flex leagues. It's the fact he can run and will run in maybe some touchdowns here and there. Well, Ridder can do that, plus probably get bigger chunks of yardage. I imagine they're going to use him more so. But the other thing is, let's see what he can do with his arm. Mariota, just so inconsistent. Sometimes looks like the man, and sometimes it looks like he doesn't belong on the football field, missing some wide open throws to guys, of course, as you know, like Kyle Pitts and Drake London. There's enough talent there that you could have fantasy production from the quarterback position, but let's see if Ridder is ready. That's the only thing. Now, I don't recommend starting him in any leagues in his first week of play. We have to see what he's made of, how he responds to his first game action. But I do recommend stashing him, especially in a super flex or 2 QB league. Chances are you're probably not going to need him, and you shouldn't need him in a single quarterback league. Hopefully you're set at that position unless maybe you had Lamar Jackson. Now, I do say I prefer Desmond Ridder possibly over a guy like Tyler Huntley as a Lamar replacement because I'm not completely sold on Huntley. We saw him flash for a couple of games before, last season. If you remember, the more playing time he got, his stats went downhill. And Desmond Ridder, is a guy, has an upside that we don't really know yet how high his ceiling could be. I think behind a really good offensive line in Atlanta with a team that can establish the run and a system that's friendly to a running quarterback, which is why they drafted him, I'm really interested in his upside. I think it might be better than a guy like Huntley. So my next option to pick up and stash is the guy I just mentioned, Drake London of the Atlanta Falcons. And you'd think he's rostered in most leagues, but that number had gone down for a couple of weeks because he just hadn't been doing much, mostly due to the quarterback play. Did come up with a big game this past week, but now the Falcons are on bye, so it wouldn't be surprising if some teams did let him go out of necessity. There's a smaller chance he's available, but if he is, this is the kind of guy you go out and you grab. Look, we've heard a lot of leagues where a guy like Mike Williams is just out there on waivers because people are tired of waiting. They don't want to put him on the bench and keep him. Okay, so if Mike Williams can be just picked up on fantasy leagues, I know Drake London is out there in some leagues. Coming off of week 13, London just matched his season high of 12 targets and established a new season/career high with 95 yards. That shows you already that they're making a conscious effort to get him more involved. That's all we needed from him, right? The concern with him is just he wasn't getting enough targets. Well, now, between that and the fact they're going to Ridder, it seems like their intent, meaning the Falcons, on involving these rookies. So I really feel a lot better about London's outlook going forward, and I think that he's a guy that if he does show up on your waiver wire, go out and check, you definitely need to grab him. All right, now let's get to some veterans, and I'll talk about a guy who probably have forgotten about, and that's Damian Harris of the New England Patriots. He's missed a couple of games. This is a player who's just always banged up, it seems like, missing time here and there. Well, I don't know if he's going to play this week, but that's, again, not the point of this. We're looking ahead, guys that you can stash. You know what? We're not beating the breakout here. Damien Harris definitely broke out last year. You may recall, ran for 929 yards and scored 15 touchdowns on the ground. Now, of course, he was the main running back for New England last year. Ramondre Stevenson was there, but just kind of played a bit role. Now it seems like it's been reversed. Ramondre is definitely the guy there right now, pretty much in every week start. And Harris, well, he'd been seeing some time more as the 1B in this backfield, and now that he's been hurt, he hasn't played at all. I do still think it's going to be Ramondre. It's pretty obvious he's the lead back there, but Harris will have a role. The main reason I'm advocating possibly stashing him is, of course, as a handcuff, because if Ramondre does get hurt, then you all of a sudden have a guy who's going to get 20 plus carries a game, almost guaranteed, because this New England offense, of course, is run first, run heavy, and they can run pretty effectively based on the strength of their blocking. So you know what Harris's upside is. He definitely could score any given game. Look, even with Ramondre sharing time with him, Harris does still have that touchdown upside. He still does get some big chunks of yardage at times. He averages 4.6 yards per carry. It's not like he's been bad this year. He's just been hurt a lot, and of course, Ramondre has been really good. So if you're looking for a handcuff, and especially if you do have Ramondre Stevenson, I highly recommend keeping Harris on your bench just in case. All right, now I'm going to mention again Cole Kmet of the Bears. It's been a while since we get to talk about him because with Fields out, finally had a down game, and then, well, now the Bears are on bye, so there's not much to talk about except he's going to be startable for the rest of this season, based on the fact that he is now the number one target in this passing game. Donald Mooney out for the season. Chase Claypool, he's been okay, but again, it's not like he's a guy who is drawing a significant amount of targets just because he's out of Pittsburgh. Kmet seems like he's the guy who's going to be the top target in this offense the rest of this season. Justin Fields looked fine, other than that very last drive there of the game in Week 13. But for the most part, Justin Fields, he's going to Kmet. We know the touchdown upside. He had that ridiculous streak of games where Kmet all of a sudden just couldn't stop scoring, which is ironic based on the fact he barely scored. In fact, I don't think he did score last year at all. So 6 catches, 72 yards this past game. That was a nice bounce back. A lot of people will have to drop a tight end like Kmet because of the bye and pivot. So I think this is the time you scoop him up, unless you happen to have one of those really top tier guys. Kmet, to me, seems like he should be a top 10 tight end for the rest of the way. And then my last pick is yet another tight end. So caveat here, let me just say, recommending a player in a segment like this isn't necessarily an endorsement. I'm not going to necessarily go out and pick up a guy like Darren Waller, but I'm compelled to mention him because I also admit I'm not always right. I'm not buying into him. I don't know that he's necessarily going to have fantasy value, at least to be in a starting lineup going forward, but I can't rule it out either. So let me just tell you, Waller will be eligible to come back after next week. Look, the Raiders, after a really disappointing, pretty nauseating loss if you're a Raiders fan to the Rams on Thursday night, you know what? They need something, and maybe Waller's the answer. Now, here's why I'm a little hesitant to just say, Waller's going to be an elite tight end again, because he wasn't before he got hurt this year. Okay, we're talking this year, this offense, with Devontae Adams in the mix, he was only averaging 10.9 yards per catch, and that was the lowest since he had been a starter in, not Vegas, but with the Raiders. And then also only averaging 35 yards per game. That's not playable. There's plenty of other tight ends who can get you that much and have touchdown upside. And again, based on the way the Raiders are playing, what is really the touchdown upside with Josh Jacobs and Devontae Adams pretty much taking up all of their offense? So Waller is a guy I'm not necessarily banking on being startable, but it's worth it, especially if you're hurting at tight end, although I prefer a guy like Kmet. Look, Waller might be your best option out there. The schedule isn't bad either, but it's not great. It gets New England, Pittsburgh, and San Francisco during the fantasy playoffs. So I'll say this again. I'm not rushing out to pick up Waller, but if you have the room, you're hurting at tight end, it's worth a flyer. All right, those are my early picks for the waiver wire. Again, heading into Week 14, don't forget everything you need with start, sit advice, and more is in our playlist. Check it out with everything you need to win.